morning, team. How are we doing today? So we are on to core workshop number 3, and we are talking about different types of planks and how to engage our muscles and our core correctly when we're doing those planks and different variations of those planks and side planks. So if you have any questions and you're watching along live, you can post them in the comments and get live feedback. But if you're watching this retrospectively, which most of you probably will be, then if you want to comment, you can do. Just make sure that you tag me in the comments so that I can come back and see it at a later date. So without further ado, we're going to crack on with some planks and variations of side planks and kind of normal planks. But before we do that, I just want to quickly kind of throw back to the last couple of weeks. We've been looking at bracing and what the core is, why it's important to train that. So if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2, I really would encourage you to go back and watch those first, just so that you have a fundamental understanding of where we're coming from with these core workshops and core exercises. Okay, so but if you do want to crack on with this without watching part 1 and part 2, you should be able to get some really good nuggets out of this one to help you really engage your core, hopefully in a better way during these exercises and get more out of your planks. So we're going to start with the elbow plank, and that is essentially just a position where you support yourself on your elbows and on your feet, but we're going to go up in stages. So we're going to start with the easiest version and build through the versions to make sure that you're getting the right support that you need. So what I'd encourage you to do at any stage in any exercise is to always start small, start light, start easy, and build yourself up in a safe and appropriate way so that you're putting yourself in the best possible state to avoid injury. Okay, so with our elbow plank, we can start this in kind of one way on our knees and then progress it up onto our feet. So as the name would suggest, we're starting, I should have got enough space on the screen. We're starting on our elbows. And if you are starting on your knees, you can just get into this position here where your shoulders are in a line over your elbows, your palms are on the floor, and you're just holding yourself in this position. So if you've been planking for a really long time, doing that version on your knees where your bum is slightly sticking into the air there, that isn't going to feel like it's particularly challenging at all. However, if you are new to exercise, if you have any core weaknesses, if you struggle with supporting yourself on your elbows and getting into that shape, then that might be a really good first port of call for you. So once you feel that you've got the kind of technique and the core engagement in this position, and do make sure that you are using that core brace that we talked about in part 1 and part 2. So we're engaging that middle section, that whole trunk section. We can then play around and experiment with going onto our toes. So we dig the toes into the floor, we straighten out the legs, and we then tuck the pelvis under and make sure that we are in a nice kind of flat plank shape. So a couple of the really common errors that I see in planking are letting the hips drop down like this. So when you do this, it puts a lot of strain onto your lower back. So you want to kind of get up into a nice straight line and then tuck the bum and the pelvis in slightly so that you feel your swimming muscles really engage. The second mistake that I see in planking is kind of doing this sort of shape here. So where the shoulders are backwards from the elbows and the bum is sticking up into the air. So what this does is it takes the onus out of the core, it makes it a lot easier, and it's not really a plank. So we have to shift the shoulders again back over the elbows, bring the bum down, tuck the pelvis in line with the body. And what you should feel when you're doing that, when you tuck your pelvis in, you should feel these muscles here in the tummy just kind of kick in slightly and re-engage, okay? And then the third mistake that I see quite a lot in the plank is this real tension through the fists and the arms and kind of gritting your teeth and shrugging your shoulders up towards your ears. So when you're in that position on the floor, we're kind of tensed up here, we're really fighting ourselves to stay in that plank. And in reality, that takes the onus away from the core section, but it adds a lot of tension through this part of the body. And we don't really want to be creating an enormous amount of tension in your neck and shoulders and back for the sake of training your core. So, a good way to do that would be to have the palms on the floor or have the palms facing up and just consciously keep coming back to the idea that you relax your shoulders and make sure that that kind of is nice and loose, okay? And the final mistake that I see quite a lot, and this is one that I do myself, and I have to catch myself when I do this one, is if when you're in this position, it's really easy to hang your head down because it's quite hard to keep your head up. What you really need to do is make sure that you're kind of tucking your chin in towards your chest almost, not hanging it down and bring it in, but just kind of pull your chin up and in, and make sure that your head stays in line with your body. We don't want the head to be hanging down like this. We want the whole of the spine, including the neck, into the head, to be in line with that plank body. Okay, so avoid those mistakes. So avoid dropping the hips down, avoid pushing the bum up. Make sure the shoulders are in a nice line over the elbows, so you've got that nice straight line from there to there. Make sure that you're not tensing up massively through the upper body and gritting your teeth and that sort of thing. And then make sure also that your head isn't hanging off the end of your body, that you've got a nice kind of straight line with the plank there. Okay, so when you kind of master those techniques, when you get into that plank position, you can hold that for as long as you want to, but I probably recommend maybe not exceeding 2 minutes. So once you start to progress in there, when you kind of get to 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, and hit the minute mark, in terms of using your time wisely and training the core in different ways, there's probably a lot more that you could do with your time than just staying in the plank for 3, 4, 5 minutes. You can probably do other exercises that would benefit your core in different ways if you were short of time. If you really like the plank and you want to keep doing it, then you go for it. You go for as long as you want to. There's no downside to doing that. But if you want to have a good variety of core training, you may want to kind of cap your plank at about 2 minutes and then pick other things to train your core. So you've got different variations of things to do, and also it can get quite boring just to be kind of staying there holding that plank for ages. Okay, so that is the things to watch out for and the kind of the basic technique of the plank. We're going to go into some variations now. So if you feel that you've kind of mastered the elbow plank and you're kind of nailing it for 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and you want to make it a little bit harder, we can just put the plank up onto our hands instead of our elbows. So the same rules apply here, in that you want to have the shoulders in a line over the wrists. You want to have the hands relaxed. Again, no hanging of the head. Keep the head up and kind of pull the chin in. And then again, we want to avoid the hips up and down. Avoid the hips pushing up, and tuck the pelvis in. So if you want to make the plank a little bit harder still, if you think the hand plank is fine, but you want some variations to just make it more interesting, you can do little things like, again, firstly, make sure that your pelvis really is tucked in so that you can feel those toe muscles really fired up as you're holding yourself up there. And then we can start to do little shifts around with the weight and where you're weight bearing. So if you want to make it a little bit harder, you can shift the body weight over the fingertips, then shift it backwards. So a little shift forwards and a shift back. Okay, so doing a few of those as part of your planking is a really nice way to just change where where you're feeling the pressure and change how your body is reacting to that plank. Okay, so just make sure, again, when you're shifting forwards and backwards, make sure that your hips aren't dropping as you shift forward. That would be a common mistake. We shift the weight forwards and the hips drop into the gap almost. So just make sure that you're really solid here before you start to make those variations to those planks. Okay, some of the other things that you can do. So from that plank position, we can also work on moving the feet around. So we can shuffle the toes backwards. This will increase the angle underneath the armpit. And I don't know if you can see it, but my body is just starting to shake like a mad thing. Then we walk the toes back in until the shoulders are back over the wrists. And again, walk those feet backwards, open out the angle under the armpit, and then walk the toes back in. Okay, so that's a really nice way to kind of lengthen out the core and again really put a lot of pressure on kind of the weight through the palms and the core to stay really strong to keep you in a nice line. Okay, so other variations that we can work on moving the hands. So you can go move the left hand, tap the front and bring it back in. You can do it as a clock face. Okay, you can walk both hands out together. This is a Y shape. This is the T shape. So those variations, they're very, very challenging because they're kind of spreading the core out in both ways. You're kind of reaching the arms out, the core really starts to challenge, and it puts a lot more onus on having to concentrate on keeping this engaged. And again, some of the things you want to watch out for with those is making sure that when you're moving your hands or feet, that you're not kind of moving your hips around too much to compensate. There'll be a little bit of movement. As soon as you lift one hand off the floor, you will find that your hips will move slightly to accommodate that balance. But you want to try and minimize that and keep both hips pointing down at the floor so that the core again stays tucked in, pelvis tucked under, and these muscles really, really firing up. Okay? A couple of other variations to this one, we can also work on like a knee drive toward the elbow. So you can do this one in an elbow plank, but it's a bit restrictive, and you might find that your bum pushes up. So there's really better ones to do on your hands if possible. So in your plank, again, just check that your core is engaged. You can lift the left leg, drive the knee toward the elbow, and then push it back. Again, lift and drive and back. Commonly with this one, I see kind of coming back into this shape and doing more of this, which again is challenging. We want to make sure, again, we're checking those technique points, shoulders over the wrists and bum tucked in as we drive those knees toward the elbows. Have a little shake off with the hands if you're joining in this morning. So they're just some variations that you can do with the plank. Have a play around with it. Make sure that you kind of enjoy the movements that you're doing. It's quite a nice feeling to feel your core really being challenged. And, you know, with each stage, if you know that you're kind of dropping the head or your shoulders are pushing back too much, or your bum's in the air, just keep working on bringing that plank in line with the rest of the body so that you can kind of support that core and really push your core to the next level. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of side plank variations now. So again, we're going to start small. We're going to start at the easiest version and work our way up to the kind of hardest version that we can do. So onto your side, we're going to start on the elbow as we did with the plank. So support your body on your elbow and try to keep the hand flat on the floor, the palm flat on the floor on this side. So the first version of this side plank would be to come up onto your knees, stack the knees, and support your core by squeezing the muscles in the side body on each side. So I've worn quite a baggy t-shirt this morning, which is a bit of a mistake, but hopefully what you can see is that if you drew a line down through my head, through my body, through my spine, and all the way down to the end there, you would see that I had a nice straight line through there. What a common side plank mistake is to shift the hips up too high and hold the hips up really high, or again, have them down too low. So just do a quick check on yourself and just make sure that you're not kind of pushing up too much and you've got a nice kind of line through the whole body. Okay, so that's the first level. The second level with this one would be to lift one knee off the ground. Again, just double checking that you're in a nice straight line. Avoid hanging the head forwards, keep the head in line with the body, and the spare hand can do anything. It can go on your hip, it can go in the air, it's up to you. The next level, making sure I'm not kicking stuff, is kind of having that leg out straight to the side, and just playing around with lifting that top leg off the floor. So we're starting here to bring in a little bit of glute work as well. So it's not just the core muscles that I can feel firing up here. It's my glutes that are helping out a little bit too with these. And that's the kind of the perks and the benefits of core training, is that we can draw in lots of different muscles and really train the body as a whole. Okay. So the next progression from one knee down and one foot out to the front is to come into a split stance. So instead of, we're not stacking the feet here, we've got one foot out to the front and one foot out to the back, and we've got that split stance. Reach the hand up toward the ceiling. Again, make sure you're not up here or down too much down here. Support yourself on that elbow and squeeze the muscles around the whole of that core section. Make sure you can keep breathing through all of these, and relax if you need a break. So shake off the arms if you need to. Between each of these variations, do take a few seconds to breathe and to have a drink, because it can't, core work is quite challenging. Just make sure that you are it's kind of attacking yourself too soon. The next progression after the split stance is to stack the feet and do the side plank with both feet stacked, and again the hips and the body in line. So it's always good to have someone to check you when you're doing this, and they can just check firstly that your bum isn't pushing out too much, that your head isn't hanging, that you're not tensing up through that arm, and that all the kind of parts of the body are doing the right stuff. And again, it's good to have someone to prompt you and say, where are you feeling this exercise? Which part of your body is doing the work? Can you shift the onus of the exercise into the right spot? For example, I was feeling that quite a lot in my shoulders, but I went swimming yesterday, so that's probably why I was feeling that more than I would normally do. So I was starting to get a little bit achy, and I've got muscle soreness in my shoulders there. So it's just being aware of where the plank is kind of focusing its effort into your body, and is that the right place for you to be feeling that exercise, or do you need to kind of mentally focus on somewhere else and just have a little shift around until you feel it in the right place? Okay, so like with the normal two-handed plank on the front, we can progress the elbow plank up into a hand plank version. And if you are going to do this one, I'd recommend with the lower body starting at the beginning again to make sure that you're going at the right level. So if you are going to plank on your hand on the side, make sure that your shoulder is in a line over your wrist. And we're going to start off with the knees stacked, and we're just starting with that one. Again, this is... It's all right, Siri wants to get involved. Making sure that when you are on your hand, it's not just necessarily about core conditioning, it's also about wrist conditioning. So if you have a weakness in your wrists, if you feel that you want to progress from doing elbows onto hands, we need to do this slowly to make sure that we're protecting those wrist joints, okay? So starting at this first level, again, make sure the pelvis is tucked in, make sure the head's not hanging. You can have your hand here or up here, it's entirely up to you. So with this one, again, you can start to play around with lifting the leg or extending the leg. And then when you feel ready, you can start coming up into a more split stance, side plank on the hand. And then when you feel really ready, you can come up into that 2-foot stack. Okay, so they are some of the plank variations that you can do all the way through. Like I just said, really making sure that you are focusing on which muscles, which part of the core, how it all works together. What do you want to be working on? What are you training your body to do? What is the intention behind the exercise? And, if you can't come up with a good reason to do something, if you can't really work out why you're doing it or what it's meant to feel like, then it may not be the best exercise for you. So just bear that in mind at all times to make sure that you are getting the best out of these exercises and the best core training. And like I said, if you have any questions, if you want any more variations, if you want the PDF to go alongside this session, I've got some session notes for you that you can have. Just let me know, and just keep planking, keep training, keep working that core, and keep thinking about the brace and the breathing, and make sure that you are supporting yourself in all of the movements that you do. Stay safe, make sure the exercises are appropriate, and that you're kind of working at a pace and a progression that feels right for your body. We never have to put ourselves in a position of pain, okay? So good exercise, good training is intense. It feels like you might have some muscle soreness, like me with my shoulders from swimming, but I'm not in pain, I'm not in agony, and it's not something that's debilitating to me. So that for you and your training, for the exercises that you choose, the things that you select for yourself to do, just make sure that they feel safe and appropriate for you and your body. And if you need any personalized help, if you have any questions on an individual basis, get in touch and we'll talk about you and your own goals. I thank you so much for your time today. This is Core Workshop on planking. This is number 3 in the series. next week we're going to move on to talking more about deadlifting. So we're going to bring in some of the core exercises and the core bracing and breathing mechanisms, and make sure that we're using that kind of principle as part of our deadlifting to make sure that we get the best out of those movements too. All right, I will see you next Sunday or on any day that you're watching this. Have a great week, and I will see you very soon. Bye.